A few weeks ago, I began conversation and dialogues with local elected officials in our community asking, hey, how can we help? Hey, what's going on? What can we do? What's the plan? What are we thinking? How can we move forward and move our community toward hopefully some solutions that would help get things reopened in a safe and responsible way, and to kind of avoid some of the quite frankly, the economic catastrophe that we're kind of barreling towards as a community. And that began a series of dialogue and conversations, the result of which was kind of unprecedented solidarity and unity between Chelan County commissioners and Douglas County commissioners working together to build a packet to submit to the governor in response to the governor's invitation to apply for variances for counties to accelerate his four-phase plan in their local communities. So we appreciated that invitation and got to work doing that. And a huge thanks to Commissioner Kevin Overbay and all the commissioners that put a ton of, we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of man hours into this very, very detailed packet to present to the governor's office both the request and the plan for how they would implement his phased reopening in a responsible way that was driven by local science and data in a regionally specific way. Our role in that was to see if we could gather some churches to sign on their support for local officials to be given authority to kind of determine the timeline of that reopening. So what I did was I wrote a 1,600 word letter, 2-page letter, and it was a little long, but the commissioners appreciated the detailed nature of it and wanted to keep all the language in there to try to help spell out in as much detail as possible to our governor and his staff the thoughtfulness to which we were approaching this problem. So this letter was written, and then I began circulating it to local pastors, and our timeline was very small, it was very short. We just had a few days really, and it was over a weekend, and by God's grace, many of those dear men called executive meetings with their elder boards, with their teams, and read the letter, prayed over the letter. And I think almost everyone we talked to was able to sign on. We got 31, I don't know if you can see the names here, 31 different pastors and churches to sign on from Wenatchee to East Wenatchee, Waterville, Chelan, Cashmere, Leavenworth. We were really encouraged by the amount of guys and their teams willing to sign on to this. So we wrote this letter and submitted this to the commissioners, and then your very own Pastor Kyle Strong wrote a letter on behalf of businesses, and then we worked in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce to spread this to businesses around the community. And again, the timeline was short, our window was small, we had to get a pretty quick turnaround, and Kyle wrote a 700-word letter, and it's a really well-worded letter that I appreciated greatly. And we started submitting it to, we passed it around to businesses in our church and the community, and we got in just 3 or 4 days, over 100 businesses to sign on, and I was just going to read a couple for you here. Actualize Sport and Fitness, Allstate Insurance, Anytime Fitness, Apple Valley Gymnastic, Apple Valley Honda, Nelson Auto Group, Arlberg Sports, Ballard Ambulance, Best Western Chieftain Inn, Blue Spoon Yogurt, Cascade Veterinarian Clinic, Cashmere Valley Bank, Coastal Wenatchee Center Hotel, Coldwell Banker, Collins Fashions, go Marcy, Community Glass, Dilly Deli, Eastmont Metropolitan Parks and Recreation. We got here Fibonacci Smile, First Choice Collision Center, Flugie Family Dentistry, Gold Construction, Harvest Valley Pest Control, Hearst Chiropractic. We got tons of folks here. Mela Coffee, Merrill Orthodontics, Mission Ridge Ski and Board Resort, North Meridian Tidal, Pickle Peppers, Osprey Rafting. My goodness. Premier One Properties, Saucedo Enterprises, Sangster Motors, Stage Kids, who else here? I'm skipping tons of names here. Sweetwood Barbecue, Swim World, Inner Circle Gym, Town Auto Group, Valley Tractor and Rentals, Wenatchee Valley Humane Society, the Windmill Restaurant, on and on. Over 100 names signed on in support of this letter. We were so grateful for them signing on, and I think speaks to the well-written prose of Kyle in capturing their heart in respectfully requesting that the governor restore local authorities, local elected authorities, responsibility to make decisions for our community. So I've made these letters available to you on our blog. If you get Grace City News, we're actually going to send you an email during this service. You'll get a link to those. If you don't get Grace City News, sign up for it on our website or our app. You can look in the comments at YouTube or on our app or Facebook or church website platform, and we'll have links to the blog for you to read these letters. And I would ask you, to please read these letters. Read, I know they're a little long, but read them so you can stay informed with how we're articulating our requests and how we're going about it, and the many, many people who are signed on and supporting that. So that's kind of an update on what we did there. Then those letters were given to the commissioners. They put them in a packet and they submitted them 8:45 p.m. on Wednesday night of this last week. And then, as many of you have heard, at 9:01 Thursday morning, the Secretary of Health for Governor Inslee rejected them outright. And quite honestly, there was not a whole lot of hope that it would be approved, the request would be approved, but I don't think there was the anticipation that it would be out and out rejected without even being read. And that was a bit of a slap in the face to our elected officials and to our local leaders that put so much work into this very respectful, very responsible, very reasonable request. And the reasons that are being given for why it was rejected, of course, are, well, there's an arbitrary number that got set halfway into this process of saying counties over 75,000 people couldn't apply for it. And of course, Chelan County happens to be 78,000 people. Coincidence? I won't get into that, but that's what was set by the governor's office. The reason that both Chelan and Douglas County felt that their offer or their proposal should be considered was that we are a joint health district, and so our Chelan and Douglas counties have a Chelan-Douglas health district that's joined through two counties because our economies are so intricately connected together. And if you take the health district's two counties and combine the numbers and divide them by two, you get a number much smaller than 75,000 per county. And so that was the reasoning that they used. As well, the Secretary of Health rejected it, saying that Chelan County hasn't had 3 weeks of no COVID positive cases, so they didn't qualify to apply. Nobody that I've talked to as elected officials think that's a reasonable standard. That's actually an impossible standard to meet biologically, medically, statistically. And if that standard stays in place, it means that we can never leave phase one. And so they had reasons why they addressed that. So I think it was a reasonable proposal that they made. I'm proud of our elected officials and how hard they worked, and you should be too. And it was outright rejected. So that was discouraging, but that's not our last play. So our elected officials continue to work for other options to try to appeal to Olympia. And again, I want to be very clear here, our involvement has been at their request to help them be granted their legal and constitutional authority to act as local elected officials for the good of our community. That's all we're requesting. We believe that once that authority gets restored to a local level, we can have robust dialogue about how best to reopen in a responsible and safe way, driven by local data and science that's regionally specific for our community, because we believe our elected officials that we know and that we have face-to-face name and face recognition and relationship with are in the best position, postured the best, to make the best decisions for our local community. So that was why we got involved in that, wanting to help them work for our community. So as well, on Thursday, I think it was Wednesday, Sheriff Burnett and I were on the radio with the agenda with David Bernstein on 560. We're going to make that radio interview available to you as well. It's going to be in the blog and in the comments, so you can read that, find that link. And I would again encourage you to listen to that if you can, just to hear kind of how we're thinking and the dialogue that's taking place in our community around these issues. Now, one of the things that's driving our motivation as a church to be involved in this is we believe our valley is exceptionally resilient. We think that if we're given the opportunity to make decisions for ourselves, that we can turn this around locally. And so that's what we're hoping will happen in the days to come. So you might be asking, well, what's the next step? Well, here's what we're being asked by our local elected officials. We were asked, they came to us this week and said, would you please go to your people and go to the community and ask them to voice their concerns, to voice their experience of this COVID-19 crisis and the widespread impact it's having, because their concern is that many of the stories are getting lost, and many of the factors that should be being considered in the situation are being lost in the conversation, and there's only a very, very narrow kind of one-dimensional slice of information that some officials are using to make their decisions. And so we've been asked by local elected officials to ask you to participate in kind of making your voice heard. So how you can do that is, I was told that there is a Chelan and Douglas Board of Health meeting Monday, tomorrow, May 18th, at 3 p.m. And we've been asked to ask you to participate in that. They want as many people as possible to come and share their concerns, maybe their stories of local businesses, losing job, losing work, losing income, how it's affecting them mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, economically. They want to hear those stories, and it's going to be a Zoom call, so it's pretty crazy that you can't just show up at a physical place. You'll need to go onto their website, click onto the Zoom. I know it's a little hassle, but they're asking that people work with the hassle and work through kind of the technical challenges so that their voice can be heard, so that the perspective of our community can be heard and understood by our elected officials as they decide what path to take next. So that's the Chelan Douglas Board of Health meeting tomorrow, Monday, 3 p.m. And I think maybe we'll put some links in the comment section or below here that you can go to. I'm not sure where those at. Our team can make that available to you. Lastly, if you have questions about life, reality, I've been getting a ton of questions about what's the biblical perspective of how to think about this. What does the Bible say about civil disobedience? What does the Bible say about the church and politics? What does the Bible say about Christians' responsibility in politics, in a community? How do you respond in a way when you're frustrated or when you're angry even, or when it feels as if there are being things done that are not just unfair or unjust, but unwise and unhelpful and actually devastating to a community? How does the church respond? How does a Christian respond? I would love to hear your questions. I've had great dialogue with some of you this week who've been asking, like, how do I think about this? How do I think about that? And here's the challenge, is as I pay attention to what's going on online and Facebook conversations and the national dialogue, everyone keeps saying, we're in this together. And I'm sure we're all hopefully sick of that phrase, because the reality is we are not in this together. The reality is there are people who are making economic policies that are themselves insulated from the effects of those economic policies. I talked with one person this week who's still getting a paycheck, is in no risk of losing that paycheck, and the comment was, yeah, I know it's a little rough for some folks out there kind of hitting their pocketbook, but we'll get through this. And I thought, my gosh, how naive can you be? Lightly hitting their pocketbook? There are a vast majority of people losing their livelihoods, losing their life work, not just like hitting their pocketbook, like their lives are being decimated. So we need to work hard as a church to feel that what everyone is feeling, because some of us are more insulated than others, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't work to feel the pain others are feeling. Paul says that we are to weep with those who weep. Now, some of us have said, I don't know anybody who's died. Well, that doesn't mean that somebody doesn't know somebody who's died from this, and we should weep with those who weep. You might say, well, I haven't lost my job. That doesn't mean you don't know somebody, or that even if you don't know, somebody has lost their job, somebody's losing their business. We need to weep with those who weep. And so the challenge of this is as I've talked to pastor friends across the nation, what we've pieced together in conversations is none of us are going through the same thing, because it is so regionally specific in relationship to how hard COVID-19 is hitting any specific region or area. It's also specific to how different governors are handling different situations and how local officials are handling certain situations. I have dear pastor friends in multiple states that are reopening this weekend. That's a very different experience than we're currently having right now. And so it's hard to kind of have this one-size-fits-all response to this. There's a need for biblical principles to be thought through, and there's a need for wisdom then to know how to apply them. Because, and I'll just say this as a pastor, your pastor and a fellow follower of Jesus and citizen of this community, is I'm hearing some people say, hey, you won't take my guns over my dead body, right? And then I'm hearing some people say, hey, we just need to do whatever the government says. That's what Jesus would have us do. And I think both of those are a little simplistic and naive and not biblical. I think there's a more measured, responsible, intelligent third way to think about this. And that's what I want to kind of invite us into considering and reflecting on these next few weeks. So here's what I'd like you to do. You can help me. If you have a question that you'd like answered, or if you have a question you've been wrestling with, either biblically or theologically or philosophically or ethically or morally, about the times we're in, I would love to hear from you. And you can do that by typing your question into the comments right now on YouTube or on Facebook or on the app, or you can email them to hello@gracecitychurch.com. So hello@gracecitychurch.com, or put them in the comments below. We'll take those questions, look at them, and then I'm going to be working on kind of a short mini series that's kind of going to interrupt our refocus series to help us think through some of these things, so we can all be working from a common set of biblical principles when we then ask for God's wisdom to know how to apply those principles in a specific way that relates to our current situation here in Wenatchee and the Valley beyond. So that's all I got for you. Hopefully that's helpful to give you an update on what we've been doing and working on and thinking about here at Grace City Church. And I'll just end by saying this. I want you to hear very clearly, our first priority is not to demand that we're allowed to meet together again. And I know that's going to bum some of you out. And I know some of you are like, I'm looking for the pitchfork with my name on it so I can rush the castle here and we can get back together. I want you to hear me say, I miss all of you dearly. I've had a chance to run into some of you this week, and it's been like a family reunion. People, oh my gosh, how are you? And it's just been so wonderful. We are longing for the day that we can get together again. And I believe that day will come. So that's there. And I do believe that there are important constitutional conversations to be had about what's been done, what we're currently in, and how to think about it. And when I say that, I don't say that as a constitutionalist. I say that as a Christian. Because thankfully, I believe in many ways the Constitution that we live under and that we've received so much blessing from, in some ways reflects biblical jurisdictions and biblical principles. And so we want to think carefully about that. But in saying all of that, I want to be clear, Grace City Church's priority right now is not to demand our right to meet. And I'm not saying if some churches take that path that that's wrong. I'm not saying that at all. Every church should do what they feel their conscience is leading them to do. But what I'm saying is, as a church right now, our burden, my burden, is to help get our community back open. Because Grace City Church, we miss each other, but we can meet for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 more weeks doing this together and be okay. It's not the best, we get it. It's not the same as being together, but we can do it and be okay. But friends, there are hundreds of businesses in our community that do not have 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks to do business online. Recent Chamber of Commerce surveys have demonstrated as much. They don't have weeks and weeks and weeks and months to just kind of see where this goes. They're on a timeline of weeks, if not days, and they'll be out of business forever and they won't come back. And so for us, we feel an obligation not just to work for the poor that Jesus is so clear about, but that to work and be a voice for those who are being forced into poverty because of some of these decisions and policies that are being made that we have concern aren't being thought through completely in terms of the totality of the impact and the long-term ramifications on our community and society. And we want to be a part of that productive civil dialogue, helping move that forward as quickly as possible in a safe and responsible way. Now, I understand, even in saying this, not all of you hearing this might agree with me, and that is totally okay as well. I want you to hear me say that your pastors and your elders are thinking through this carefully and praying through it discerningly and asking God to give us wisdom to know how to move forward in a way that would represent the name of Jesus well and work for the flourishing of our city. I feel a burden, not just to make sure Grace City Church stays strong, but I have a burden to help Grace City Church make sure our community stays strong. I believe God's called us to love our community and to speak up for our community and to work for the flourishing of our community. So that's our posture. That's what we're working on. Sorry this has been longer than I intended. I'm cutting into Pastor Kyle's time, but I wanted you to hear from me that we are working hard behind the scenes with elected officials for the good of our city, trying to infuse productive dialogue into the conversation, and we'll have more updates for you hopefully this week and the weeks to come. And if you give me your questions, I'd love to start answering those, because I think it's time for us as the church to start thinking critically about things that we maybe have not thought about before, and we're going to be better for it. God's going to refine us and purify us and sanctify us and mature us and grow us up, and I have no question that God is at work. I have no question that God is in the middle of this stuff, and we want to continue asking Him to give us wisdom to see where He's moving so we can follow Him there, to be the salt and light in our community He's called us to. And Grace City Church, you're doing that in so many ways. So we're gonna stay in community. We're going to stay in the Word. We're going to stay in prayer. We're going to stay generous. We're going to stay focused on faith over fear. And as we do those things, as we can together as a community, I believe God's going to use us in this unique time, and He's going to use it to grow His kingdom. He's going to use it to grow us up. And on the other side of this, we're going to be better. We're going to be stronger, and we're going to be postured to make what I believe is going to be an unprecedented kingdom run on the other side of this.